Well, good morning, everybody. Glad that you guys are with us as we kick off a brand new series. For those of you who might be visiting Mosaic and you don't know how this place really works, I just want you to know that what we do is we kind of work our way straight through a book of the Bible. And the reason that we do that is because it forces me to address all kinds of issues. It forces me to address those issues that I may not really want to address, but I need to address because either I struggle with it or I see that people in our community are struggling with it, or maybe the entire world is struggling with it. And so that's what we do. But what we do is we work through a book of the Bible, is we create a series. And the series is very much a framework that kind of helps us understand the text in a context. And so I kind of want you to think about a series at Mosaic, kind of like a chapter title, right? That the chapter title gives you a context for everything that you're reading in that chapter so that you can kind of follow the train of thought that the author is working from. And so when we come to John chapter 9, 10, and 11, what you see is that Jesus is making a lot of I am statements. Jesus says things like, I am the gate, whatever that means, right? Jesus says things like, I am the good shepherd. Jesus says, I am the resurrection and the life. And if you don't understand these statements and what they really mean, then you'll never really understand Jesus and who He is, right? And so that's why we're calling this new series, we're creating a new framework, and the title of the series is called The Jesus I Never Knew. And so I kind of want to start right there. I don't know what you think about when you think about Jesus. You don't have to answer out loud, but I at least want it on your radar. Like what's the first thought that pops into your mind when you hear the word Jesus? For some of you, it may be a negative thing. Maybe you've been burned or you've been hurt by religion. Maybe you feel like God wasn't there for you when you really needed Him to be there for you. And so you may be kind of coming into this series, and this series is important for you but because you're going in a negative way and you don't really understand who Jesus is. And so I'm hoping that you'll stick with me through the entire series because I really want someone like you to understand the Jesus you never really knew. Okay? But a lot of you, it's not a negative thing. It's probably more of a positive thing. A lot of you probably hear Jesus and you think God, you may think miracles, you may think cross or sacrifice or prophet. We threw it out on Facebook this week and we just asked people who follow us on social media, tell us what's the first thing that you think of when you think about Jesus. And overwhelmingly the response was one word and one word only. It was the word Savior. Now, all of that is great stuff. But what I want you to know is that there is so much more to Jesus than just that. And so my hope for you over the course of this series is that you'll start to understand some of these I am statements so that you might have a far more complete picture of who Jesus really is. You see, most people acknowledge that Jesus existed. I just don't know if a lot of people understand why Jesus matters. In fact, it's one of my biggest concerns as I talk to people today. There are a lot of people who say, when I hear Jesus, I think God, I think miracles, I think Old Testament, I think New Testament, I think prophet, I think Savior. And if that's the way you think, then typically what that means is that you believe Jesus has a lot to offer me for the next life, but I don't know if Jesus has much of anything to offer me in this life. And I want you to know that nothing could be further from the truth. When you understand who Jesus is, you will understand why Jesus matters. And so here's the big idea for the day as we kind of start working our way into John chapter 9. I want you to leave today knowing that Jesus is the one who cares about you in your pain and suffering. As we make our way into John chapter 9, that is the very situation that we come across. Jesus is traveling around in His community and he has an encounter with a man, and this man is suffering. But what's really sad about this man is that he's not just suffering, he's suffering alone. And that right there is why I think a lot of us are going to be able to easily identify and relate to what this man is going through and what his experience was like. I used to have a friend who would come up to me and he would always say, "Brendan, how you doing?" And I would always respond to him and go, "No complaints." And he would always fire back at me and he would always say, "Good, because if you're complaining, nobody's going to want to be around you," right? Now I hear that, and I used to hear it all the time, and I would think to myself, there's a little bit of truth behind every joke. Have you ever noticed that when you have something to complain about, it feels like no one really wants to be around you? When you're going through a hard time, when you're experiencing some degree of pain and suffering in your life, have you ever felt like, man, it seems like nobody around me seems to even care about me? In fact, some people go so far as they're running in the other direction. It's almost like they're trying to avoid you rather than showing that they actually care about you. I think that happens all the time and for all kinds of reasons. I think sometimes we don't show that we really care about one another because we don't really know one another. And in some cases, that's on us because we haven't made relationships a priority in our lives. And so we don't do a great job of showing that we care for one another, but because we really don't know one another all that well in the first place. I think another reason that so many people go through life and we don't do a great job as human beings of showing that we care about one another in our pain and suffering is because I'm so overwhelmed by all of my own problems, I don't even have time to help you with your problems, right? So it's like we're out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico and we're drowning ourselves. And so I can't think about saving you because I need someone to step in and save me. A lot of people feel very much overwhelmed by their own problems. And what that does is it leads to a mentality and a way of thinking that so many people in America today have bought into, right? Jesus taught us that we should love our neighbor as ourselves, but we live by the motto, it's every man for himself, right? And so we kind of go through life and we don't do a great job of showing one another that we care. We don't do a great job of truly living in community where we carry one another's burdens, we feel one another's pain, and we show one another that we truly care. And so it's not just that we suffer. Far too many people in this world, they are suffering alone. Some of you right now are going through a really difficult season, and you're not just suffering, you're suffering alone. It may be chronic illness or chronic pain. It may be a broken family. You may be suffering alone as a concerned parent. You're looking at the decisions your children are making and the direction that their life is heading, and you are suffering alone as a parent. You may be suffering alone as a leader. You go to work tomorrow, and no one feels the pressure that you feel. No one in the organization is carrying the burden that you're carrying. That's why they say it's lonely at the top. There are a lot of people in a lot of different situations in life where people are not just suffering, they're suffering alone. In fact, that's what we see in John chapter 9, starting in verse 1. Not a lot in this verse, but I want to read it to you just to get us identifying with this man that we're going to learn about today. This is what the text says. It says, as he, Jesus, went along, he saw a man blind from birth. Now, again, I realize there is not a lot in that verse, but what I do want you to do is I want you to pause for just a second, and I want you to try to put yourself into this man's shoes. I want you to think with me about what his life would have really been like. Okay, this man was not just blind, he was born blind. Okay, and so he has been suffering his entire life. He's never seen the world that he lives in. He's never seen his parents' faces. All of his life, he has been living from blindness. In a first century world, this man would have never had access to education because of his disability. In a first century world, this man would have never found work. He literally was doomed to be a beggar and a burden to society his entire life. That's a lot of suffering, okay? But the good news, and this is kind of the moment in the story where I need to go spoiler alert, okay? Jesus is going to heal the guy, okay? That's what Jesus does. It may not be a big surprise to you, but Jesus is going to heal the guy. And when it happens, the people in his life, the people who were closest to him are in such shock and they are in such disbelief that we read in verses 8 and 9 that his neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging asked, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" Some claimed that he was. Others said, "No, it only looks like him." Right? I want you to think about that. This man's not just suffering. I want you to think about and understand that he's suffering alone. This is a guy that when you look at him, the people who were closest to him in life couldn't even recognize him. The neighbors who lived right next door, right across the street, the people who walked past him every single day as he was sitting on the side of the road begging for something to eat, these people, like so many of us, don't even want to make eye contact with the people who are suffering in this world. So they just kept going to the point that they can't even recognize the guy. That this guy was very much suffering alone. The only thing that he had going for him is that Jesus saw him. And I want you to know today that I believe with all of my being, God brought some of you here because you need to know that Jesus sees you in your pain and He sees you in your suffering. And a lot of you need to hear that today. You need to hear that Jesus sees you. You need to hear that Jesus has not forgotten about you. You need to hear that Jesus is very much for you and that He absolutely loves you. Other people may not see you. Other people may not care about you, but Jesus does. Jesus saw this man in his suffering, and the great part about his suffering is that his suffering is what would actually take him from simply hearing about Jesus to actually knowing and trusting Jesus. He's getting ready to see a side of Jesus that he's never known before. And God wants the exact same thing to happen in your life. Our suffering is what often takes us in life from simply hearing about Jesus to actually knowing Jesus in a deep and personal way. There's a guy named Timothy Keller who wrote a book years ago. It was called Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. It may be a book that some of you need to be reading right now in this season of your life. In his book, Keller wrote this. He said, one of the main ways we move from abstract knowledge about God to a personal encounter with Him as a living reality is through the furnace of affliction. Whether we want to admit it or not, it is often our pain and our suffering that makes God more real to us than He's ever been at any other point in our lives. I don't understand it. But so many of us, when life is good, we see no need for God. But when life is hard, when we hit rock bottom, when we come to the end of our rope, when we find ourselves in a desperate situation, we look to God in a way that we've never looked to Him before. That is the power of pain and suffering. Real pain and real suffering, they have a way of showing us what really matters. Now, Jesus doesn't just see this man in his pain and suffering. Jesus and His disciples are going to have a conversation about this man in his pain and suffering. And the conversation is really, really important because it clarifies so many of the misunderstandings that we have about the problem of pain in our world and in our lives. Look at verse 2. His disciples asked him, they asked Jesus, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And so these guys are making an assumption that I think a lot of people make. In their culture and in our culture, a lot of people assume that good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. For whatever reason, it's just the way that we naturally think. And so we'll be driving down the street in Ocean Springs, wherever you live, and you see a homeless guy on the side of the road, and you probably think, whether you want to admit it or not, oh, he's probably an alcoholic. He's probably addicted to drugs. He's probably cheated on his wife and she kicked him out and he had nowhere else to go. Why do we think like that? Because we believe, we assume bad things happen to bad people. And then we take a drive down East Beach and we look up at the houses on the hill. We think, man, those people got it all together. Let me tell you something about people who live on East Beach, okay? I've met with some of them, okay? They got problems in their life just like you do, right? But we drive down the road and we look at the house on the hill and we think, man, they got it all together, because we believe that good things always happen to good people. Jesus' disciples have concluded bad things happened to this man, either because he was bad or because his parents were bad. Is that true? Sometimes that's true, but that is not always the case. Jesus' disciples have apparently skipped the day in class when they were covering the book of Job, right? The book of Job is a story about really bad things that happened to a really good man. Now, here's the problem with this way of thinking, and it's why us as followers of Jesus cannot think this way any longer. If we always assume that bad things happen to bad people and good things happen to good people, then what will happen to us is we will secretly celebrate when we see people who are getting what we think they deserve, right? So in a real way, we'll be kind of like this guy, right? Finally, thank you, karma, right? We're looking at people that we don't like and we celebrate the power of karma, right? It finally came back on them. They got what they deserved. And let me tell you something. This right here is no way to be human. We cannot secretly celebrate at someone else's expense because we know everything that's going on in their life and we think we know what they deserve and what they don't deserve. The problem with this way of thinking is it really will keep us from being like Jesus. You will never live like Jesus if you don't think like Jesus. You'll never have compassion like Jesus. You'll never understand people like Jesus. You'll never love people like Jesus. You'll never be merciful like Jesus. You'll never be generous like Jesus. Instead, we'll just leave one another to suffer and to suffer alone because we think they're getting what they deserve. That is no way to be human. It's no way to live life. It's not what I need in my life when I'm suffering, and it's not what you need in your life when you're suffering. And so we got to understand how Jesus sees the situation. Jesus talks about it in verse 3. He doesn't see it the way they see it. Instead, Jesus said, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him. And so what we want to do is we want to know, why did this happen to that man? Or why did it happen to us? And what Jesus wants to talk about is not why, but how. It doesn't really matter why it happened. What really matters is how are we going to see Jesus go to work in our situation now that it has happened. It's not why did it happen or God, why are you allowing this in my life? It's God, how are you going to use this in my life? These are two very different ways of thinking about the problem of pain in our world. Now, I imagine that when you are going through hard times, when the pain is real in your life, you're probably wanting to know why. I know I do. That's why we ask the questions that we ask. We want to know, God, what are you doing? God, why is this happening? God, did I do something to deserve this? God, are you mad at me? God, why are you allowing this? Or maybe even causing this? I need you to know, if you ask the wrong questions, you will get the wrong answers. In some cases, you don't need to be asking why. You need to be asking how. God, how are you going to use these terrible things that are going on in my life? You need to know there is a purpose to your pain. If you think about it, there was a purpose to this man's pain. You're getting ready to see it. There was a purpose to Jesus' own pain. We know that. And if there was a purpose to their pain, I promise you this, there is a purpose to your pain, and there's a purpose to my pain as well. He can use that pain to get our attention. You ever experience something like that? It starts to hurt a little bit, and all of a sudden you go, whoa, I'm awake, I'm alert. He got my attention because of some pain. I was talking to a 17-year-old young man on Thursday night after this message, and we were talking about how he had been in a very severe car accident that could have ended his life. And it was like that pain and that experience woke him up to some realities that he wasn't thinking about as a 17-year-old man. It was like God said to him, you're not going to live forever, so you better be living for me. It got his attention, right? That's how God uses pain in our lives. Sometimes He uses it to get our attention. Sometimes He uses our pain to make us stronger. Sometimes He uses our pain to bring us into a relationship with Him or bring someone else into a relationship with Him. Sometimes God uses our pain and our suffering so that we might be more compassionate and more understanding, so that somewhere down the road of our lives we can help other people because they are now walking a path that you used to walk years ago. God is great at bringing purpose out of our pain. Jesus is going to use the pain in this man's life. And I'm telling you, He's going to use it in all kinds of ways. He's going to use the pain in this man's life, not just to bring this man to know Jesus. He's going to use the pain in this man's life to teach this man to trust Jesus. This man's sight is getting ready to be restored. But before it is, Jesus wants to teach this man to walk by faith, not by sight. When you have sight, you walk by sight. It's just what we do. It's what we depend on. But when you don't have sight, you have to walk by faith. And so the question is, well, what does it even mean to walk by faith? Okay, to walk by faith is to trust what someone else sees and to trust what someone else says. This blind man can't see. And so he's lived his whole life having to trust what other people see, and he's had to trust what other people say. But before his sight is restored, Jesus is going to teach him, dude, you are going to have to continue to live all of life, not walking by sight, but walking by faith. You cannot go through life trusting what you see and what you say. You've got to trust what I see and what I say, right? In a very real way, I'm starting to understand what this is like. Jeremy told you guys that today's my birthday, and I don't know what happened and when it really happened, but I'm starting to lose my vision the older I get, okay? And so you guys don't know this, but I secretly carry my glasses on stage now every week because I've noticed, especially on Thursday night when I'm teaching at like 7 o'clock, like I don't know if my eyes are just tired, but like I can see you just fine. I have no idea what's written on these pages up here. It's like I find myself kind of going, man, I'm lost in my notes, and like I just keep getting further and further away, hoping that I can see it, right? So I secretly carry my glasses because my eyesight is really starting to fade. Where I really feel the pain is in a restaurant. Anybody know what this is like? Everybody over 43, raise your hand, right? Yes, like you know what this is like. Like your arms are getting shorter. It's like, man, I used to be able to see these receipts so that I could see the total and so I could know how to tip, but I can't see it anymore. And so I'm going to give you a life hack, okay? A couple of options for you. One thing you can do is you can just break out the old cell phone. Anybody ever open the camera on your phone and then blow up the total so that you can see how much it is? Come on, be honest. Yes, a lot of you have done this, right? Others of you are going, that's genius. I'm going to start doing this, right? But what I often do, though, is I just give the receipt to whoever I'm with. And I say to them, I can't see the total. Tell me what the total is so that I know what to tip, right? And when I do that, I have to trust what they see, and I have to operate off of what they say. This is what it means to walk by faith. It's to trust what Jesus sees, and it's trusting what Jesus says, even when it doesn't make a lot of sense. Verses 6 and 7. After seeing this, he spit on the ground, Jesus did. He made some mud with the saliva, and he put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. The word means sent. So the man went and washed, and he came home seeing. Now, again, immerse yourself into that guy's life for just a minute. Can you imagine living in a world where you are constantly trying to create images in your mind only by what you hear around you? And so here this guy is sitting on the side of the street, can't see anything, he's begging for food. Here's some people walking closer, and then he hears a guy spit on the ground. I'm like, right there, I'm like, what's going on? And then he senses that this guy is like stooping down and he's mixing. He's rubbing that saliva and that dirt together, and you don't fully understand what's happening until all of a sudden you feel it on your eyes. Now, this is not like a facial, ladies, where you get the mud all around except in your eyes. It's the exact opposite of that, okay? Like this is like only in his eyes. And then Jesus said to this man, he said, hey, dude, you need to go and you need to wash that off at the pool of Siloam. To which I'm thinking this guy is probably like, you think? Like, what'd you think I was going to do, Jesus? Just walk around the rest of the day with this mud in my eyes? Of course I'm going to have to go wash it off. Thanks to you, right? And so I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, man, what would that have been like for this man? And this is really important for us to understand, because this scene, it teaches us something we need to see about Jesus. It teaches us that Jesus is unconventional. And I think the reason that it's so hard for people to trust what he sees and to trust what he says, the reason it's so hard for people to follow him is because Jesus is always doing things that we don't really understand. But here's the deal. You'll never know the unconventional Jesus if you don't embrace his unconventional ways. This man is getting ready to have an experience with Jesus that is going to change his life forever. And I mean forever. But in order for it to happen, this guy was going to have to do some things that were a little unconventional. And I want you to know this. Jesus wants to change your life for the better. But you're going to have to do some things that feel a little unconventional. Don't have sex before you get married? That's unconventional. Don't take every penny that you make and spend it all on yourself. Use some of it to be generous to the work of God or the needs of others. That's unconventional. Don't spend your whole life trying to get everybody else to serve you. Spend the rest of your life serving others. That's unconventional. Don't use your words to tear people down and rip people apart. Use your words to build people up. Like that's unconventional. And so you're going to go through life and you're either going to follow the conventional ways of this world or you're going to follow the unconventional ways of Jesus. To this man, what Jesus is doing probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But to Jesus, it makes perfect sense because he can see something this blind man can't see. He can see the end of the story. He can see the healing that's about to take place. He can see how his suffering is going to be alleviated once and for all. He can see the outcome. He can see the end result. He can see how this man's faith is getting ready to grow. And through it all, this man is going to learn that I better spend the rest of my life trusting what he sees and trusting what he says, even when it doesn't make sense. And so I'm curious. Do you trust Jesus like that? Do you live life trusting what you see and what you say? Or do you live life trusting what Jesus sees and what Jesus says? See, I think the reason that we trust what we see and what we say is because we either can't admit or we will not admit that we got blind spots. Jesus is going to say at the end of the chapter, you're blind. I don't know if I got time to unpack all that for you. We'll get to it later in the series. But what I think we can all agree on is that even if we don't agree that we're blind, we can all agree that we at least have blind spots, right? When it comes to the future, I got all kinds of blind spots. I can't see end results. I can't see outcomes. I don't know how it's all going to play out. And because of that, I have to trust what he sees and what he says about the future, right? When it comes to temptation, I've got all kinds of blind spots, right? I look at things in this world and I think, that looks good. And then Jesus says, no, that's not good. And so I have to trust what Jesus sees. I have to trust what Jesus says. That's what it looks like to walk by faith. When it comes to our pain and our suffering, right? I've got all kinds of blind spots. If it doesn't feel good, I just naturally conclude, man, this is not good. And I get frustrated, I get angry, I start asking why. I want to blame God, I want to blame other people. That's not the way Jesus sees it, and it's not what Jesus says. Listen to James, Jesus' little brother, chapter 1, verses 2 through 4, New Testament writing. He said it like this. He said, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith. I know you want to walk by sight, so I'm going to test your faith. I'm going to see if you're really willing to trust what God sees and what God says, and that produces something. The testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Again, you've got to remember that there is purpose to your pain. Is life hard? Yes, it is absolutely hard. But if you're going to have everything you need, you're going to have to go through some things that you don't want. This is how God works in our lives, because what God knows is that when you go through that, it will mature you, it will complete you so that you have everything that you need to handle whatever life throws at you. And so I want you to learn this today, and I want you to live with it for the rest of your life. That there is a big difference between the way Jesus sees it and the way you see it. And that right there is why you have to trust Him, not yourself. It's why you have to walk by faith, not by sight, especially when the pain and the suffering is real in your life. And let's just be honest. For some of you, the pain and the suffering right now is so real, you're looking for anything you can find just to cope. Don't medicate. Don't cope. Find the one who sees you in your pain and in your suffering and live in relationship with him every single day. Don't try the drugs. Don't try the drinks. So a lady earlier in service said, "What you doing? Playing with the Rubik's Cube? It's my way of trying to calm down." Don't try the Rubik's Cube. Try Jesus. Try the Jesus who sees you in your pain and suffering. Try the Jesus who cares about you in your pain and your suffering. Try the Jesus who is speaking to you right now in your pain and your suffering. Try the Jesus who has promised to always bring good things out of your pain and your suffering. What's that look like? It means that you spend time talking to Jesus, and it's not why, it's all about how. It's I trust you, but I need to know, how are you going to bring something good out of all that is bad in my life right now? Are you going to make me stronger? Are you going to build my faith? Are you going to teach me a lesson? Are you going to bring someone to Christ? Like, God, what are you up to? Just help me see it so that I'm willing to walk through it. Life verse, Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. It says this: "Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, submit to Him." Don't question Him. Don't accuse Him. Don't blame Him. Don't turn your back on Him. Submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. You want to get through the pain and the suffering and that difficult season of your life? What's the fastest way between 2 points? A straight line. You submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. And on the other side of the pain and suffering, He will show you how He has been working all along. As we wrap up our service today, I'm going to ask the band to come out. They're going to sing a song for us called "King of My Heart." And this song is a powerful reminder that God is good, even when life is hard. And so I want you to stand. We're going to sing in just a second. I want you to know that if you need a pastor to talk to, a pastor to pray with, through these double doors to my right and to your left, you can make your way. I'm going to be in there. Other staff are going to be in there, because we care about you in your pain and in your suffering. So let's stand as I pray and prepare to sing. God, we thank you so much for your word. We thank you for the reminder that it gives us. God, for those people who are here today and the pain is real, I pray, God, that you would be real. I pray, God, that every word that has been spoken, every verse that has been read will just linger in their hearts and in their minds. I pray, God, that they would believe now more than ever that you are good, even when life is not. Pray, God, that they might be able to see your hand and how you're working in their situation, in their life, in their pain, in their suffering. Pray, God, that their faith might grow. Pray, God, that even now, but before they can actually see it, I pray, God, that by faith they would be able to sing it, that you are good even when life is not. God, I pray that you would use those painful circumstances in our lives to teach us to trust what you see and what you say. God, for those people who need someone to talk to, I pray, God, that they would feel the freedom to come and talk and pray during this song or even after the service is over. May they know that they are not alone. I pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen.